Hello and welcome. I'm very happy you are here today. This video is made for people who want to learn English. It is easy to follow and good for practice. Today, you will listen to a simple and powerful story. It is about a boy who lives in a small village. He works hard, faces many problems, and never gives up. This story can help you learn English and also learn about life. As you listen, follow the words on the screen. You can hear the right pronunciation and see how sentences are made. If you don't know a word, pause and listen again. This is a great way to practice reading and listening. You can learn step by step and grow more confident every day. Thank you for choosing Easy English Official. Let's begin this story together and enjoy learning English. Chapter 1. The Village Boy. In a small village hidden between green hills and quiet rice fields, there lived a boy named Simon who dreamed bigger than the sky. His hands were rough from farm work, but his eyes still carried the light of wonder. Every morning, he woke to the sound of roosters and the smell of wet soil, knowing the day would be long yet filled with purpose. Though his world was small, his imagination could reach beyond the mountains. Simon's home was made of bamboo and mud, standing proudly despite the rain and wind. Inside, a single candle lit the room where his family ate, talked, and sometimes laughed away their worries. He didn't have toys or new clothes, but he had stories. Stories his father told under the stars. Each night, those stories taught him to see beauty in the simplest moments. While other children played by the river, Simon often sat alone with an old notebook and a broken pencil. The pages were filled with words he barely understood, but each word felt like a new door opening. He would whisper them softly, practicing English from memory, pretending he was talking to the world. His dream was not to leave his home, but to bring the world closer to it. His mother always told him, "We don't have much, my son, but we have time. Use it well." Simon took her words like a promise. He helped her wash clothes by the stream and carried firewood from the forest. Every time he worked, he imagined that each drop of sweat was a seed that could grow into his future. At sunset, he would sit on a wooden stool outside his house, watching the sky turn gold and orange. He would open his notebook and read aloud the few English words he knew. Dream, hope, learn, believe. He didn't know if he pronounced them right, but he felt their power in his heart. The candle beside him flickered as if cheering him on. Sometimes the other boys laughed at him for studying so hard. They said, "Simon, books can't feed you. You should work, not dream." Their words cut deep, but Simon just smiled. He knew hunger well, but he also knew that the hunger for knowledge was stronger. Each insult became a reason to try harder. His shoes were torn and patched many times by his father, yet he walked proudly to school every morning. The road was long and muddy after the rain, but Simon carried his dreams like armor. He listened carefully in class, even when he didn't understand everything. When the teacher spoke English, his heart raced with excitement. Those sounds were music to him. There were days when he wanted to give up. The lessons were hard, the words strange, and sometimes his stomach empty. But whenever he felt weak, he remembered the promise he made to himself, that he would not stop until he could speak and teach in English. He imagined standing before a classroom one day, helping other children believe in themselves. One rainy night, the candle went out before he finished reading. The darkness filled the room, and thunder rolled above. Simon could not see the words anymore, but he could still hear them in his mind. He smiled in the dark and whispered, "I will not stop." That night, even without light, his dream continued to shine. His father, tired after a long day, saw the boy reading and asked, "Simon, why do you study so much?" Simon looked up and said softly, "Because I want to teach, Father. I want to help others like you helped me." His father nodded, quietly proud, though he didn't fully understand. Love spoke louder than words. Every morning, Simon carried a basket of vegetables to the market before school. He sold them to buy pencils, notebooks, and sometimes a small piece of bread. The market women liked him because he was polite and honest. "One day you'll be a big man," they said. Simon only smiled. He didn't want to be big. He just wanted to be useful. The village teacher noticed Simon's hard work and began to lend him books. Old, worn books with missing covers. But to Simon, they were treasures. He read about people who changed their lives through learning. He saw that even the poorest person could rise if they had knowledge. From that day, he promised to learn something new every single day. Sometimes he sat under the big mango tree near his house, watching birds fly freely in the open sky. He would imagine himself as one of them, flying high, carrying words instead of wings. He didn't yet know where life would take him, but he believed that learning English could open a window to the world. His sister, who was much younger, often asked him to teach her. Simon would smile and say, "Let's start with one word, love." They laughed together as they practiced, and her laughter gave him strength. In teaching her, Simon learned that knowledge grows when it is shared. When the dry season came, the village fields cracked under the sun. Many children stopped going to school to help their families. Simon, too, worked longer hours, carrying water and helping his father plant new seeds. Yet at night, when everyone slept, he opened his notebook again. No matter how tired, he always found time to learn. He didn't have a desk or a lamp, just a small candle and his notebook on the floor. Sometimes mosquitoes bit him, and the wind blew his papers away. But Simon didn't complain. He simply picked them up, smiled, and started again. His dream was stronger than any obstacle. Every Sunday, Simon went to the small church where the old priest spoke about faith. The priest said, "Faith is believing even when you cannot see." Those words became Simon's second language, the language of the heart. He learned that believing in himself was also a kind of faith. The other villagers began to notice Simon's discipline. They said, "He's a strange boy, always studying, always dreaming." But his mother defended him proudly. "One day," she said, "you will all see why he studies." Her faith in him became the wind behind his back. As the months passed, Simon's English began to improve. He could understand short sentences, read simple stories, and write his name in clear letters. Each new word felt like a small victory. Sometimes, he would run to his mother just to show her a new phrase he learned. Her smile made him feel like the richest boy in the world. One evening, while sitting near the river, Simon looked at his reflection in the water. He whispered to himself, "I may be poor now, but my mind is growing every day." The water rippled softly, as if agreeing. In that quiet moment, Simon understood that success doesn't start with money. It starts with belief. When his notebook finally filled up, he kept writing on old paper bags and empty rice sacks. Words were his treasures, and he refused to stop collecting them. He didn't care about what others thought. To him, Learning was freedom, and no one could take that away. At night, the stars shone brightly above his small village. Simon looked up and imagined that each star was a dream waiting to be reached. He didn't know how far he could go, but he knew one thing for sure: he would never stop trying. The boy with the broken shoes had already begun walking the road to greatness. Chapter 2: Failure and Pain. The day of the big English exam came faster than Simon expected. For weeks, he had studied under the dim light of a candle, repeating words until his voice grew tired. Every page he read was a small hope, every mistake a small fear. Yet he believed that all his effort would finally lead him toward his dream of getting a scholarship to a better school. When he entered the classroom, his heart was beating like a drum. The teacher handed out the papers, and Simon took a deep breath. He tried to remember everything he had learned, every word, every rule, every line. But as the questions stared back at him, his mind suddenly felt blank. The letters danced on the page, and his hands began to shake. He looked around and saw his classmates writing quickly, their pens moving like wind. He felt a wave of panic rising inside. He whispered to himself, "Calm down, Simon. You can do this." But time moved faster than his courage. The bell rang, and his paper was still unfinished. He walked out quietly, his dream trembling inside him. Days later, the results were announced on a big whiteboard at school. The students gathered around, shouting and laughing with excitement. Simon stood at the back, too afraid to move closer. When he finally looked, his name was not there. His body froze. His breath caught in his throat. He had failed. The laughter of others faded into silence. He felt the world shrink around him. Everything he had worked for suddenly seemed meaningless. His hands felt heavy, and his heart felt like a stone sinking in water. The road he had been walking so bravely now looked endless and dark. He walked home slowly that evening, his feet dragging through the dust. The sunset no longer looked golden. It felt like the sky itself had fallen. His mother met him at the door and smiled, asking, "How was it, my son?" Simon couldn't answer. He just looked down and shook his head. Tears filled his eyes before words could form. That night, Simon didn't eat dinner. He sat alone outside listening to the crickets sing in the dark. The sound that once comforted him now felt like a reminder of failure. He opened his notebook but couldn't read a single line. The letters looked blurry through his tears. For the first time, he wondered if maybe the others were right. Maybe dreams were not for boys like him. He thought about all the hours he had spent studying, all the nights he stayed awake when others slept. Was it for nothing? He whispered. The candle beside him flickered weakly, as if answering his sadness. In that fragile light, Simon felt small, invisible, and lost. When his little sister came to him with her homework, she noticed his eyes were red. "Brother, can you help me with my English?" she asked softly. Simon wanted to say no, but something inside him wouldn't let him. He looked at her innocent face and saw hope, the same hope he once carried. He took her book and began to explain, even though his voice was low and tired. As she repeated the words after him, Simon felt something strange inside, a quiet warmth that began to melt his sadness. Her smile reminded him that his dream was never just for himself. It was for his family, his village, and every child who needed light. After his sister fell asleep, Simon sat in silence, staring at the stars. They looked far away, like his dreams, but still shining. He realized that failure wasn't the end. It was only a lesson, a pause before the next try. I failed once, he said softly to himself, but I will rise again. The next morning, the world looked different. The air smelled fresh, and the sunlight felt gentle on his face. The pain in his heart was still there, but now it carried strength. Simon picked up his old book and held it close to his chest. He whispered, "You and I, we start again." He walked back to school even though no one asked him to. Some classmates laughed, saying, "Didn't you fail? Why come back?" Simon smiled faintly and said, "Because I'm not finished yet." His quiet courage surprised them. They didn't know that a failure can be the beginning of something stronger. That day, he sat at the back of the class, listening more carefully than ever. Every word the teacher said sounded like a key that might open another door. He wrote notes neatly, even when his hands still trembled. He was no longer afraid of being slow. He just wanted to keep moving forward. At home, Simon began a new habit. Each night, before reading, he would write down one lesson from his failure. "Be patient," he wrote. "Believe again. Learn from mistakes." His notebook slowly filled with wisdom born from pain. It became a map guiding him out of the darkness. There were nights when he cried quietly, but he didn't stop. Sometimes tears fell onto his pages, but he turned them into strength. "Every drop," he told himself, "is proof that I still care." In his heart, he knew that only those who try can ever fail, and only those who fail can truly rise. His parents noticed the change in him. His mother saw him studying again and smiled. "You're stronger than before," she said. His father simply patted his shoulder, saying nothing, but his eyes were full of pride. In that silence, Simon felt comfort deeper than words. The villagers began to whisper, "That boy failed the exam, but he's still studying. He must be crazy." Simon heard them, but instead of feeling hurt, he felt calm. He understood something they didn't, that real success starts when others stop believing in you. Weeks passed, and Simon's English began to grow sharper. He practiced reading aloud to the trees, repeating every sound until it felt natural. Sometimes birds flew away as he spoke, but he laughed. "Even if no one listens," he said, "I will keep talking until the world hears me." The pain of failure still followed him, but now it was like a shadow walking behind, always there, but no longer in control. He used it as a reminder of where he started and how far he could go. Failure was no longer his enemy, it had become his teacher. One evening, as he closed his book, Simon looked at the candle burning low. The same candle that had once seen his tears now reflected his determination. "You and I," he whispered, "we're not done yet." The flame flickered as if it understood. That night, before sleeping, Simon wrote one last sentence in his notebook. "I failed once, but I will rise again." He underlined it twice, smiled, and closed his eyes. For the first time since his failure, he slept peacefully. The pain had turned into power. The next morning, he woke up before sunrise. He went outside, felt the cool air, and watched the horizon slowly turn from dark to gold. "A new day," he whispered. "A new chance." Simon smiled. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but he was ready. Chapter 3. Working harder. From that day, Simon decided that failure would not be the end of his story. He woke up before the sun when the air was still cool and quiet. The village was asleep, but his dream was already awake. He washed his face in the cold river and whispered, "Today, I will try again." Every morning, he helped his father carry water from the well and feed the animals. His hands grew rough, but his heart grew stronger. The work was hard, but Simon no longer complained. He had learned that pain could be a teacher and effort could be a prayer. After helping at home, he walked 5 kilometers to school with his torn shoes. The road was long and dusty, winding through rice fields and small hills. Sometimes the heat burned his skin, and sometimes the rain soaked his clothes. But Simon walked with purpose, his eyes fixed on the horizon. When he reached school, he was often tired, but his spirit was bright. He sat in the front row, ready to listen and learn. Every word from the teacher felt precious to him, like drops of water falling on dry ground. He wrote carefully, afraid to lose even one sentence. Other students sometimes laughed at him. They said, "Why try so hard? You failed once already." Simon smiled and said softly, "Because I want to rise higher." Their words didn't hurt him anymore. He had learned that dreams are invisible to those who stop believing. During lunch breaks, while others played football or told jokes, Simon stayed in the classroom to read. He didn't have many books, but he read the same pages again and again until he understood. The teacher noticed his effort and began to help him after class. That small kindness gave Simon new strength. At night, he studied by candlelight, the same candle that had seen his tears before. The flame danced gently as if proud of his return. His mother sometimes told him to rest, but Simon shook his head with a smile. "I can rest when I learn," he said. His eyes were tired, but his heart was on fire. He began to make small goals for himself. 10 new words each day, 1 new grammar rule each week. He practiced speaking aloud even when no one was listening. The words came slowly, but each one brought him closer to the dream he once thought he lost. When he forgot a word or made a mistake, he didn't get angry anymore. Instead, he laughed and tried again. "Every mistake," he said, "is a sign that I'm learning." That belief turned his failures into fuel. Slowly, his fear of failure faded away. Sometimes, after finishing his chores, he climbed the small hill behind his house. From there, he could see the whole village below and the endless sky above. He would open his notebook and read aloud, letting his voice mix with the wind. "Dream, work, believe," he repeated again and again. His father noticed how early Simon woke up each day and how late he studied each night. "You work too hard, my son," he said. But Simon smiled. "If I work hard now, life will be easier later," he replied. His father said nothing more, but deep inside, he was proud. The other villagers began to talk about him again. This time, their tone was different. "That boy never gives up," they said. Some even asked him to teach their children small English words. Simon was shy, but he agreed. Teaching others made his heart feel full. He began to realize that the more he helped others, the more he learned himself. When he explained a word to another child, he remembered it better. His dream of becoming a teacher no longer felt far away. It felt alive inside him. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. Simon's notebook filled with new lessons and new dreams. The once empty pages now carried the story of his growth. Each line was proof that hard work can rewrite the past. He learned to manage his time like a craftsman shaping wood. Morning for work, afternoon for school, evening for study. There was no room for laziness. Even when tired, he found energy in his purpose. Discipline, he told himself, is stronger than talent. His mother sometimes worried about his health. "You need rest," she said gently. But Simon replied, "I'm building something, Mother. It's not a house or a farm. It's my future. She didn't fully understand his words, but she understood his heart. There were still moments of doubt. Sometimes, after a long day, Simon felt exhausted and thought about giving up. But then he remembered how it felt to fail and how far he had come since then. That memory pushed him forward like a gentle wind. He began to see small changes. He could read faster, understand better, and speak more clearly. Each improvement made him smile. "Step by step," he said quietly. "I'm getting there." It wasn't magic. It was the power of patience. One evening, the teacher asked him to read aloud in front of the class. Simon's hands trembled, but his voice was steady. When he finished, the class clapped. It was a small moment, but to Simon, it felt like victory. He realized that courage grows each time you face fear. That night, he walked home under the stars, his heart full of light. The road was still long, but it didn't scare him anymore. He had learned to love the journey. "Hard work," he whispered, "is my best friend now." The moon seemed to smile above him. When the rainy season came again, Simon's shoes broke completely. He tied them with string and kept walking. The mud was deep, but he didn't stop. Every step reminded him that success is not about comfort. It's about continuing when everything gets hard. He began to teach his sister and 2 neighbors every weekend. They sat under the mango tree, using sticks to write words in the dirt. Apple, book, dream. The children laughed, and Simon laughed too. His small class became a small beginning. Through teaching, Simon discovered his purpose again. He wasn't just learning English anymore. He was learning to inspire others. His dream was no longer a secret. It was something he lived every single day. That realization gave him peace. One night, as the candle burned low, Simon looked at his notebook filled with words, lessons, and dreams. He smiled proudly and said, "This is my story, the story of hard work." The candle's flame flickered softly, reflecting in his determined eyes. He closed his notebook and whispered, "Tomorrow I will work even harder." Then he blew out the candle and lay down to rest. In the darkness, his dreams glowed brighter than ever. For Simon, the boy who once failed, the journey had only just begun. Chapter 4. A new teacher, a new light. The new school year began with whispers of excitement. A new teacher was coming, someone the principal said was different. When Miss Theory entered the classroom, her smile filled the room with light. Her voice was soft but strong, and her eyes shone with kindness. The students felt something special about her right away. Simon sat quietly in the front row, curious and nervous. He had heard that Miss Theory had studied abroad and spoke English fluently. When she greeted the class in perfect English, Simon's heart skipped a beat. Her words were clear, confident, and full of warmth. He dreamed of speaking like her one day. From the first lesson, Miss Theory noticed Simon. While other students whispered or looked bored, Simon's eyes followed every word she said. She saw how hard he tried, how carefully he wrote each line, and how his hands trembled with quiet determination. There was something pure about his effort that touched her heart. After class, she called him over. "Simon," she said gently, "you listen very carefully." "That's good. But do you understand?" Simon hesitated. "A little, miss." "I'm still learning," he replied shyly. Miss Theory smiled. "Good. Keep learning. If you are willing to work, I will guide you." Those words felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. From that day, Simon's world began to change. Miss Theory stayed after class to help him with pronunciation and grammar. She taught him not only the meaning of words, but also the power behind them. She explained that English was not just a subject, it was a bridge to new possibilities. When Simon made mistakes, she didn't scold him. Instead, she said, "Mistakes mean you're trying." For the first time, Simon didn't feel afraid to speak. He practiced with confidence, even when his voice shook. Each correction from her became a gift, a step closer to his dream. Miss Theory often told the class, "Success is not luck. It is preparation." Those words stayed in Simon's heart like a song. He repeated them every morning on his walk to school, letting them guide his steps. They became his new belief, stronger than fear. Sometimes, after class, she shared stories about her own struggles when learning English. "I wasn't perfect," she said, "but I never gave up." Simon listened closely. Hearing that even teachers had once struggled made him feel less alone. It reminded him that every master was once a beginner. Miss Theory saw the fire in Simon's eyes and decided to give him extra lessons. She brought old books, flashcards, and recordings for him to practice. "You don't need new things to learn," she said. "You just need new effort." Simon treasured everything she gave him like gold. One afternoon, she asked him to read aloud in front of the class. Simon's hands trembled as he held the book. The room grew quiet. He began slowly, his voice unsure at first, but with every word, he grew stronger. When he finished, Miss Theory smiled and said, "Well done, Simon." The class clapped, his heart filled with pride. That night, Simon couldn't sleep. He kept replaying her words in his mind. "Well done, Simon." It was the first time anyone had ever said that to him. It felt like a key unlocking something deep inside. For the first time, he believed he might actually become a teacher one day. Under Miss Theory's guidance, Simon's English improved faster than ever. She taught him to think in English, not just translate. She made him read aloud, write essays, and even speak to the class. "You learn best by doing," she always said. Simon worked harder than ever, but this time he enjoyed it. Sometimes Miss Theory stayed late to talk about life. She told Simon, "Confidence is like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it grows." Simon smiled, repeating those words silently as he practiced in front of his mirror at home. Slowly, his fear began to disappear. When Simon made progress, Miss Theory didn't praise him too much. She reminded him, "Be proud, but stay humble." "You still have far to go." Simon nodded. He knew she was right. Her honesty made her guidance even more valuable. One day, she gave the class a small challenge, to write an essay about their dreams. Simon wrote about becoming a teacher who could help poor children learn English. When Miss Theory read it, her eyes softened. She looked at him and said, "Simon, your dream is beautiful, and you can make it real." Those words became his fuel. Every morning he woke up with new energy, ready to work harder. The road to school no longer felt long. The candle at night no longer felt weak. Everything in his life began to glow with purpose. The other students started to notice the change in him. He spoke more confidently and helped them with lessons. "Simon, you're becoming like a small teacher," they said. He laughed, but felt proud. Miss Theory's belief in him was spreading like light. She encouraged him to join an English-speaking contest at school. Simon hesitated, afraid of failing again. "What if I forget my words?" he asked. Miss Theory smiled. "Then remember your heart. Speak from there, and no one will forget you." Those words gave him courage to try. In the contest, his voice trembled at first, but soon his story flowed naturally. He spoke about his village, his family, and his dreams. When he finished, the audience clapped loudly. Simon didn't win first place, but he won something better: confidence. After the contest, Miss Theory placed her hand on his shoulder. "You did well," she said. "You are growing." Simon smiled. "Thank you, miss. I couldn't have done it without you." She shook her head. "No, Simon. I only showed you the door. You walked through it yourself." From that day, Simon saw learning in a new way. It wasn't just about studying. It was about believing, sharing, and giving. Miss Theory had given him more than lessons. She had given him light, and that light began to guide everything he did. Even after school ended each day, Simon stayed behind to help clean the classroom or organize books. "Hard work is my gratitude," he told her. Miss Theory smiled, knowing she had touched a heart that would one day touch many more. When the rainy season came again, Miss Theory gave Simon a new pair of shoes. "For your long walk to school?" she said. Simon tried not to cry. "Thank you, miss. I'll walk even farther now." She smiled softly. "I know you will." At night, Simon sat by his candle again, holding his notebook close. He wrote down the words Miss Theory had told him. "Success is not luck. It is preparation." He underlined the sentence twice, then whispered, "Thank you, miss." I won't forget. The stars outside shone brighter that night. The boy who once studied in silence now studied with purpose. The teacher's faith had become his new fire. In his heart, Simon knew he was no longer just a student. He was becoming a light for others, too. Chapter 5. His Second Chance. The morning of the English speech contest arrived like a sunrise full of promise. The schoolyard buzzed with excitement, students in neat uniforms holding papers and rehearsing lines. Simon stood quietly under a tree, holding his speech with trembling hands. His heart pounded, but inside that fear lived a spark of hope. Miss Theory found him and smiled softly. "Nervous?" she asked. Simon nodded. "That's good," she said. "It means you care." She adjusted his collar and whispered, "Remember, Simon, don't speak to impress them. Speak to inspire them." Her words calmed his racing heart. Inside the hall, colorful banners hung across the stage. The air smelled of chalk, flowers, and excitement. Students from different schools filled the seats, whispering and waiting. Simon took a deep breath, repeating to himself, "Be brave, not perfect." When his name was called, his legs felt weak, but he forced himself to walk to the stage. The lights were bright, and the crowd looked endless. For a moment, he froze. But then he remembered Miss Theory's voice. He looked up and began to speak. His English wasn't perfect, but his heart was. He spoke about his village, his family, and how failure had taught him to rise again. His voice trembled at first, but soon grew stronger. Each word carried truth, and the room grew silent, listening deeply. He talked about hope, about working hard even when the world doubts you. "We don't need to be perfect," he said. "We just need to be brave." When he finished, the room erupted in applause. Simon stood still for a moment, shocked. They were clapping for him. After the contest, Simon waited quietly as the judges announced the results. First prize went to another student, someone who spoke with flawless English and great style. Simon felt a small sting of disappointment, but then he heard his name again. "The most inspiring speech award goes to Simon." The crowd cheered, and Miss Theory's eyes filled with tears. Simon walked to the stage, his hands shaking, his heart light as air. The certificate he received wasn't just paper. It was proof that courage mattered. As he held the award, he looked out into the crowd and saw Miss Theory smiling proudly. Their eyes met, and in that moment, Simon realized something powerful. Success wasn't about being number one. It was about touching hearts. That evening, Simon walked home with his certificate held tightly to his chest. The sunset painted the sky with colors of gold and fire. He felt taller, stronger, and lighter. The road that once felt endless now felt full of new beginnings. When he reached home, his family rushed out to greet him. His mother hugged him tightly. "You did it, my son!" she cried. His father smiled quietly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I always knew you would make us proud," he said softly. Simon placed the certificate on the small table near the candle. It wasn't just an award. It was a reminder of how far he had come. He stared at it for a long time, then whispered, "Thank you, Miss Theory. Thank you for believing in me." Later that night, he sat by the window, listening to the sound of crickets and wind. The stars above seemed brighter than ever. "I didn't win first place," he said softly, "but I won something better." He smiled to himself, feeling peace in his heart. The next morning, Simon went to school early. When he entered the classroom, the students clapped and cheered. "You were amazing, Simon," they said. For the first time, he wasn't shy. He simply smiled and said, "Thank you. I just spoke from my heart." Miss Theory congratulated him again, handing him a new notebook. "Write your next dream here," she said. Simon opened it carefully and wrote on the first page, "Be brave. Keep learning." The words looked small, but they carried his entire heart. In class, Simon listened more deeply than ever. He wanted to keep improving, to honor the faith Miss Theory had given him. Every new word he learned felt like another step toward the teacher he wanted to become. The other students started to ask Simon for help with English. He shared what he knew, smiling as he explained. Teaching them made him feel alive. It was as if he was becoming the person he had always dreamed to be. Sometimes Miss Theory watched from a distance, proud but silent. She knew that her work was almost done. Her student was becoming his own light. In her heart, she whispered a prayer for him. "Keep shining, Simon. The world needs your story." As weeks passed, the award on Simon's wall became a symbol of strength. Whenever he felt tired or uncertain, he looked at it and remembered that bravery had brought him this far. It reminded him that even a small victory can change a life. One afternoon, the principal called Simon to the office. "Simon," he said, "a new scholarship program is opening." Miss Theory recommended you. Simon's eyes widened in disbelief. His second chance was coming, not from luck, but from hard work. He thanked the principal and ran to find Miss Theory. "You did this for me?" he asked. She smiled. "No, Simon. You did this for yourself. You earned it." Her voice trembled with pride. That night, Simon sat again by his candle, holding the scholarship form. The flame flickered softly, just like the first night he dreamed of studying English. But this time, he wasn't afraid. He was ready. He looked at the sky and whispered, "I didn't win first place, but I won a new beginning." The stars above seemed to nod in agreement. His journey wasn't over. It was only changing shape. And as the wind passed through the fields, Simon closed his eyes and smiled. He had learned the greatest lesson of all. Success isn't about being perfect. It's about being brave enough to keep going. Chapter 6. The Day of Truth. The months that followed were filled with nothing but books, paper, and dreams. Simon woke before sunrise every day, his candle flickering as he read and wrote. His world had become small, just his desk, his notebooks, and the sound of his own heartbeat echoing with determination. Every page he turned felt like a step closer to his dream. His hands were rough from farm work, but steady when holding a pen. Sometimes exhaustion whispered to him to stop, but he answered it with a quiet, "Not yet." Each night, he pushed himself a little more. The national exam was not just a test of English or knowledge. It was a test of everything Simon had ever learned about life, patience, and courage. He knew that this exam could change not only his own life, but his family's future too. As the exam day approached, the entire village seemed to know. Neighbors wished him luck, and children followed him on the path, saying, "Simon will win!" Their faith became his armor. For the first time, he didn't feel alone on his journey. On the morning of the exam, the air was cool and quiet. Simon wore his cleanest shirt, ironed by his mother with trembling hands. His father walked with him part of the way, carrying silence like a prayer. When they reached the old bridge, his father stopped and said, "Go, my son. Show them who you are." Simon nodded, his throat tight with emotion. He continued walking alone, the road stretching out before him like destiny itself. He thought of every late night, every candle burned down to its end, and every word Miss Theory had taught him. At the exam hall, students crowded the entrance, whispering nervously. Simon stood at the edge for a moment, closed his eyes, and breathed deeply. "I'm ready," he told himself. "I've already come this far." Then, with calm courage, he stepped inside. The papers were handed out, crisp and white. His fingers trembled as he turned the first page. Questions filled the sheets: grammar, comprehension, essay writing. Each one felt like a mountain to climb. But Simon had climbed mountains before. He started writing, slowly at first, then faster. His pen seemed to move on its own, guided by months of preparation and quiet strength. Every sentence was a memory of struggle transformed into power. Time passed, but Simon didn't notice. He was lost in the rhythm of focus. When the final bell rang, he looked at the clock and smiled. He had given everything he had. Walking out of the hall, sunlight hit his face, and he felt lighter than he had in years. "Whatever happens," he whispered, "I'm proud of myself." Days turned into weeks, and the waiting began. Each morning, he woke up with a mix of hope and fear. His mother prayed more often. His father worked silently, pretending not to worry. Miss Theory visited sometimes, bringing books and soft words of encouragement. The whole village seemed to hold its breath. Everyone knew when the results would be announced. Children ran through the fields shouting, "It's tomorrow! Tomorrow!" Simon tried to smile, but inside, his heart raced faster with every passing minute. That night, he sat by the window again, looking up at the stars. "I've done everything I could," he said softly. "Now it's in God's hands." He placed his old notebook beside him, the one filled with dreams and mistakes, his constant companion. When morning arrived, he walked to the school where the results were posted. The sky was bright, but his vision blurred from nerves. Students gathered around the notice board, shouting, crying, laughing. Simon stood at the back, afraid to look. Then he heard someone call out, "Simon! Your name is here." His heart jumped. He pushed gently through the crowd, searching for the truth. His eyes scanned the list, and there it was. Simon, regional top score. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. The world grew silent, as if holding the moment still for him. Then joy burst through him like sunlight through clouds. He laughed, cried, and covered his face with trembling hands. He had done it. Miss Theory arrived moments later, hearing the noise. When she saw Simon, she smiled with tears in her eyes. "I knew you could do it," she whispered. Simon hugged her tightly, his voice shaking. "I couldn't have done it without you." At home, his mother wept with joy, holding the letter like treasure. His father, usually quiet, shouted proudly to the neighbors, "My son passed!" He passed. The small house that once felt heavy with worry was now filled with laughter and light. That night, the whole village celebrated. Lanterns hung along the road, children danced, and old men played music. Simon stood in the center of it all, humbled and grateful. "This is not just my success," he said to Miss Theory. "It's ours." Later, he walked alone to the small hill overlooking the fields. The moon shone gently on the rice paddies, and the air smelled of rain and new beginnings. He thought about every failure, every tear, every time he almost gave up. All of it had led him here. He opened his notebook again and wrote, "I passed." Then, under it, he added, "But I will never stop learning." His handwriting was firm, strong, a reflection of who he had become. As he closed the notebook, he smiled and whispered, "Thank you, life, for giving me a second chance." He lifted his eyes to the stars, feeling them shine back at him, like 1,000 small congratulations from the universe. In that quiet moment, Simon knew the truth. Success wasn't something that happened overnight. It was built from pain, persistence, and purpose. And this was only the beginning of his real journey. Chapter 7. Giving Back. The city was bright and full of opportunities, but Simon never forgot his village. He walked the streets with wide eyes, carrying books and dreams larger than himself. The scholarship opened doors he had only imagined in candlelight. After his first year, Simon packed his bag and returned home. The fields looked smaller, the hills unchanged, but his heart was full. Children ran to greet him, their laughter a melody he had missed dearly. He began teaching under the shade of old trees, their branches like gentle guardians. Some students had never held a proper textbook, but Simon's patience turned every challenge into a lesson. Each word they learned made his heart swell. In small classrooms, Simon spoke softly, guiding hands over letters, correcting mispronunciations with care. He remembered the nights he studied alone and promised himself no child here would feel that isolation. Sometimes, the light was dim, and they studied by candlelight, echoing his own past. He would smile and say, "Even in the dark, knowledge can shine." The students believed him because he lived it. Parents watched from afar, unsure at first, but soon they joined in, helping their children practice. The village felt alive in a new way, buzzing with hope and determination. Simon's teaching was not just about English. He taught courage, patience, and the importance of dreaming. Every story he shared reminded them that failure was only a step, not the end. The children asked endless questions, and Simon answered each one with care, turning curiosity into understanding. He encouraged creativity and expression, letting their voices be heard, loud and proud. Even on rainy days, Simon refused to let the lesson stop. Students huddled under awnings, notebooks pressed close, listening as he read aloud. Rain could not drown the fire of learning he had ignited. Word of Simon's classes spread to nearby villages. Young students walked miles, eager to learn from the boy who had once struggled like them. They called him Teacher Simon, a title he carried humbly. Every evening, Simon returned home tired but fulfilled. He would sit by the window, looking at the fields, and reflect on the journey that had brought him here. Every failure, every sleepless night, had led to this moment. He thought of Miss Theory, whose belief had transformed his life. He wrote letters to her often, sharing victories and challenges, grateful for the guidance that started it all. Simon introduced small English games, songs, and stories to make learning fun. Children laughed as they repeated phrases, their joy echoing across the village. He knew that learning needed love, not just rules. He encouraged students to dream beyond the hills, to imagine possibilities wider than the rice fields. "Your dreams are not too big," he said, "and your hearts are big enough to reach them." Village elders observed quietly, realizing that education was no longer a distant hope. Simon had planted seeds that would grow for generations. He created simple libraries from donated books, turning corners of homes into reading nooks. Every book was a window, and he showed them how to look through it. The students grew more confident each day. They stood taller, spoke louder, and dreamed bigger. Simon felt a deep sense of pride, knowing that he had become a bridge between their past and future. Evenings were sometimes spent under the stars, teaching after chores were done. Children repeated new words softly, their voices blending with the sounds of crickets and wind. Simon remembered his younger self, sitting alone, wishing someone would teach him. Now he realized he had become that someone, and that thought warmed his heart more than any sunlight. He encouraged parents to read with their children, showing them that learning could be a family journey. The village began to hum with curiosity, excitement, and a new culture of education. Every challenge was met with patience. If a child stumbled over a word, Simon gently corrected, reminding them that mistakes were part of growth. His voice was calm, his encouragement unwavering. Festivals were now punctuated with recitations, songs, and stories in English. The village that once celebrated only harvests now celebrated learning, and laughter intertwined with knowledge. Simon often looked at the stars before bed, thinking of all the steps that brought him here. Each one was a story, a lesson, a memory that shaped not only him but the children around him. He whispered softly to himself, "I was given a chance, and now it's my duty to give back." His heart was full, not with wealth, but with purpose, gratitude, and love. The boy who had once walked 5 kilometers to study alone now walked among a group of eager learners. Every smile, every word spoken correctly, was a victory far greater than any exam. And as the sun set over the green hills, Simon knew the journey was far from over. His path had changed, his mission clear, and his heart open, ready to inspire countless others who would one day follow. Chapter 8: The Real Meaning of Success. Years passed, and Simon had grown into a thoughtful young man. His journey had been long, full of struggles, failures, and tiny victories. Every step had shaped him into who he was today. He became a teacher in the village he once called home. Though the city offered more money and fancy opportunities, Simon chose to stay close to the children who reminded him of himself. His heart was full, not his bank account. Every morning, Simon walked the familiar paths to school. He greeted each child with a smile, patience, and encouragement. Every small gesture mattered, and every day brought new lessons for both him and his students. Even after gaining respect and recognition, Simon lived simply. His home was modest, his clothes plain, but his heart radiated joy and purpose. He understood that happiness was not bought, it was nurtured. Parents came to him, grateful for his dedication. Students hugged him, eager to share their progress. Simon listened to them, celebrated their wins, and offered guidance for their mistakes. Every success, he knew, was a shared one. When reporters came asking if he felt successful, Simon paused and smiled softly. "I am," he said, "because I never gave up. I helped others, and I live with purpose every day." His words carried weight, for they were lived truths, not empty phrases. He often reflected on his younger self, sitting by candlelight, dreaming of a better life. He remembered the nights of doubt and the moments he wanted to quit. Yet those struggles had taught him resilience, patience, and humility. Success, he realized, was not measured by money or fame. It was measured by growth, by the ability to remain kind, and by the power to lift others as you rise. Every student who learned a new word, every child who believed in themselves, was proof of this truth. Simon created programs for learning beyond the classroom. He introduced reading circles, small study groups, and storytelling sessions. Children who once had no hope now envisioned futures full of possibility. He traveled occasionally to nearby villages, sharing his knowledge and inspiring other teachers. His mission was clear: education was a gift, and its power multiplied when shared generously. Through every challenge, Simon stayed grounded. He never boasted, never compared himself to others, and never forgot the boy who walked 5 kilometers to study under the sun. Humility remained his greatest strength. Evenings were spent quietly, writing in his notebook, recording ideas, and reflecting on the day. He documented stories of students, hopes fulfilled, and lessons learned, so others could follow in his footsteps. Simon often thought about Miss Theory, whose faith in him had changed everything. He remembered her words, "Success is preparation meeting opportunity." He realized that it was not only true for him, but for every child he taught. The village transformed slowly. Young learners were confident, eager, and curious. Families now valued education. The community had shifted from survival to hope, all because one boy refused to give up. Simon's own life remained simple, yet meaningful. He rode a bicycle, carried old books, and ate the same meals he grew up with. Yet his days were rich with smiles, laughter, and stories shared under the sun. He celebrated small wins with his students. Each time a child read a sentence, wrote a paragraph, or spoke in English, Simon felt joy deeper than any achievement of wealth or fame. He taught lessons beyond textbooks: honesty, patience, perseverance, and kindness. Every story, every word, was a seed planted for the future. He knew that true learning went hand in hand with character. Simon encouraged students to dream big. "Your village does not define your limits," he said. "Your effort, courage, and kindness do." He reminded them that failure was not the end. It was a step forward. Visitors came from afar to see the teacher from the small village who had inspired so many. Simon greeted them warmly, but always returned to the children, his true priority and inspiration. Even on challenging days when resources were limited or the weather harsh, Simon continued. He remembered how every step of his journey was built on perseverance, and he wanted to model that for his students. He smiled as he watched students help each other, correcting mistakes gently, encouraging friends, and working together. They were learning more than English. They were learning life. Simon often held small workshops for parents, showing them how to support learning at home. Education became a community effort, a shared dream nurtured by care and belief. He kept writing, recording lessons, experiences, and stories from his classroom. These writings would later inspire teachers and students far beyond the village, spreading hope to many. Simon never stopped dreaming, even as he helped others achieve theirs. He envisioned a world where education was accessible, where no child felt left behind, and where persistence was celebrated. He knew that every failure he faced, every challenge he overcame, had led him here. Success was not a moment. It was a lifetime of choices, kindness, and determination. In quiet moments, Simon looked at the stars above the village. They reminded him that even small lights could shine brightly in the darkness, and every child he taught was now a star, ready to illuminate the world. Simon understood at last. The real meaning of success was not about what he had gained. It was about what he gave, the lives he touched, and the hope he spread. He whispered softly to himself, "I have succeeded, not because I am the richest or the strongest, but because I have never stopped. I have helped others, and I wake up every day with purpose." And with that, Simon's story became a beacon for generations, a lesson in courage, kindness, and the true essence of success. Thank you for watching this story on Easy English Official. Remember, learning English takes time, but every word you learn brings you closer to your dream. Keep practicing, keep believing, and never give up. If you liked this story, watch it again or try to tell it in your own words. Small steps make big changes. See you in the next video, and remember, you can do it.